As far as driving in races is concerned, it's a little bit of akin to every pancake day as far as Russell Maisner is concerned, but he certainly is a very interesting character who's been associated with a number of high-profile stables throughout his 30 to 40 years involvement in harness racing. I caught up with Russell after one of his very rare drives, and it was at Club Menangle today. Well, Russell, good to catch up with you. You've just come off the track after being unplaced with brevity, always well back on the pegs, and you just couldn't get into the race.
Yeah, pretty hard to get in the race. When they run 151, got out of the gate really nicely, posied up well, but then it was either sit outside them and they keep rolling or, drive for luck, so we opted for the latter. But
Russell, going around a track like Menangle, compared to the time when you started to get interested in harness racing with your dad, as around about a 10-year-old going to the showgrounds.
Very different racing, different horses, different carts, very different style of racing. I learnt to drive at the showgrounds, which was 604 metres, 3 furlongs. This is 7 furlongs, much more spacious, faster, and they just keep rolling as we saw in that last race.
Russell, your dad didn't have a steep interest in harness racing, he just loved racing in general.
Yeah, he used to go to the gallops when I was a kid. I remember very little, and twice a year we'd go as a family. And as it turned out, through his profession as a physio, he managed some jockeys through injuries, and one of his clients owned a pacer. So, one connection led to another, and, the passion just kept going.
So that was around about 15 years of age. Who did you start out with at that particular stage?
At the showgrounds, I helped two what I would consider old-style trainers, Les Turner and Jim Doolan. Spent 4 years there, learnt to drive there, got my licence at a track called Gower Park, which was in Preston, and the showgrounds, which wasn't a whole lot bigger than the showgrounds. From there, I think I spent around 4 years with Frank Hoban and his 2 sons. I was friends with one of them pretty closely. From there on, I think we moved up to Sydney, and I befriended Darren Hancock, and we've remained, very good mates ever since. And, that was a turning point in terms of what I saw in training and driving compared to, the guys that were a lot older and a different generation.
Russell, during that period at the showgrounds, did you have a favourite horse?
Look, there was a few going through the eras, but I think Welcome Advice is one that pops out as one of the best, and I think the first horse I ever raced was by him, so there's some sort of affinity there. But, there were some stars. If I think to the trainers and the drivers there was Hondo Grattan came there, paleface. I saw Welcome Advice was just tough, pure steel, just different era, different horses. The stars in terms of drivers in those days were Brian Gath, Gordon Rothaker, Ted Demler, Neville Welsh, Don Dove. They're just, great drivers. But, as the years have gone on, and I learnt this from Gavin, who, you adapt to the racing style. Otherwise you can't be competitive. The young guys coming through are just so good these days. There's a stack of young drivers who you'd gladly put on both in Victoria and New South Wales.
So you mentioned Darren Hancock, and you're wearing Darren's colours at the moment, but you've had a wonderful association with the Hancock family in general, commencing with Brian.
Yeah, we raced our first good horse with Brian, a horse called Lady Muck. Bought her with some friends in 1989, and we sent her up here. I think her race career was 13 starts for 6 wins, 4 placings. So she was a lovely mare, and sadly succumbed to injury. And I think, she won 5 at Harold Park with Brian, and then I got to know Darren. And when I moved up here with the bank I worked for at the time, I spent 5 years here. I'd go to his property every Saturday morning, and if it wasn't there, we'd go to Bull-Eye Trials, and you'd always throw me a drive or two. So, it goes back a long time now.
As far as Darren is concerned, 2001, great memories. Trained by Andy Gath, a horse by the name of Laconic, taking out the Australian Pacing Gold 2-year-old fillies final.
3-year-old fillies final. She was probably the fastest horse I had at the time, but she had bone chips in both knees, and she won the 3-year-old APG final with bone chips. So I asked Darren if he'd drive her when we were up here, and he said, yep, sure. And the rest is history. She jumped to the front, and, you know, that was... it's pretty emotional.
It's been a wonderful family, breeding from all those horses, Lady Muck, and abbreviated, abridged, and brevity.
They have been. I've been fortunate that I've been able to keep the ones that I thought were going to be good horses. Abridged, which is Brevity's half-brother, he won his first 7 races, then had some bone issues. Sadly, didn't see the best of him. Brevity is the highest prize money earner that I've ever had. And, you know, he's starting to find his level now, but there's still some races in him. And I said to Cam, you know, if we get to a point where we think he's uncompetitive, he's such a delightful horse, I'll retire him rather than push on.
Russell, you've been associated with a lot of wonderful stables, some great names. We mentioned Brian and Darren and Andy Gath. You're also associated with Emma Stewart as an owner, and also with Clayton Tonkin, and you consider it a privilege travelling a long distance to drive track work for him.
Yeah, I do probably just under 300 kilometres most Saturdays, and I've done it twice this week because I went to Ballarat trials for him as well. Yeah, look, it's just fantastic going there and you know, getting the trust of Clayton and Emma to drive whatever they want me to drive, and it changes week to week. I know their system. I like to think that I've got sort of good attention to detail. If I see something, generally ask one of the staff or Emma and Clayton about it. So, yeah, no, it's really good.
Great vote of confidence in you when you consider the horse flesh that you're driving is very valuable and very talented.
Yeah, it is. When I look at some of the horses and I go, gee, how much is this one? And, you know, they're in the hundreds of thousands. It's it is a privilege, and I guess they trust me to do the job that they need being done. They've got a great team of full-time staff. I'm one of the few part-timers, and yeah, normally I get there on a Saturday and Clayton just directs me to whatever he wants to do.
You saluted the judge a couple of weeks ago with an Emma Stewart trained horse. You also part own Another Big Man. Another Big Man. We won on him at Charlton, coming off a run where he was unwell at Geelong beforehand. I think that there wasn't a whole lot of respect for him in that race because he opened up at $2.20 and someone told me he ended up jumping at $7. Now, naturally, I can't bet, but I wish I had been able to. And he felt great. He never felt that he was going to be beaten. Anything from the trials we should be watching out for that you've been driving?
Ooh, I drove a 3-year-old. I think he's still 2. Techie's watching at Ballarat. I thought he was really nice. There was another filly I qualified for them, Constant Class. She ran up the straight really nicely. You know, as long as they do everything right and they're there to do what they're supposed to do, whether it's a conditioning run or a qualifying run, we're pretty happy.
You were just looking at the honour roll just adjacent to where we do the interview, and it brought back a lot of fond memories.
Yeah, Caribbean Blaster. I worked him before he won the Chariots of Fire when I was spending time with Andy and Kate. And I remember coming back into the shed and Kate said, what do you think? And I said, you drive this horse positive in the Chariots. I said, he'd be into it up to his ears. And I think he was 30, 40, 50 to 1. And the rest's history, guaranteed. As one I drove when I was at Clayton's as well. Poster boy's there, but I never got to touch him. He was Emma's horse, that's it.
Russell, do you find the driving and training of horses a relief from the pressure involved in your job as a bond trader?
Certainly has been. There's been times over the years where it is unrelenting in terms of work pressures, financial pressures, and doesn't matter how you feel, of a morning when you get out of bed. By the time you jump on one and go around the track, whether it's hot, cold, indifferent, you're in a different zone. So it's, we talk about these days mental health and issues, and there's no doubt it's therapy. Our daughter, who's now at second year uni, she was riding since she was 6 years old. And I used to take her lessons and then competing show jumping and eventing, and my wife would say, well, it's cheaper than therapy. So, I think it's just a great vocation sport of any kind if you're involved in equines, whether it's harness racing, gallops, doesn't matter.
Well, Russell, it's been great to catch up with you. Hopefully we'll be seeing you around Menangle on a few other occasions. I know Brian and Darren have been speaking very glowingly of you today, and it's good to have a chat.
Yep, no, thank you very much. Appreciate it.